My name is Sam Smith. I was Houston Audubon board president from 2019 to 2021. And when I was going to be president, I was very excited because 2019 was the 50th anniversary for Houston Audubon, and I was getting to chair that event. And it was a great gala. We had a great time, but then COVID hit, and so I became the COVID president instead of the 50th anniversary president. So that in the past with Houston Audubon, I was chaired the Land Conservation Committee. I worked. Flo Hanna is the one who really got me involved in Houston Audubon on doing volunteer things, and I got to meet Mr. Jim Wynn at one of the hurricane cleanup parties in Boy Scout Woods, helping him with a chainsaw one day. I remember that very vividly because that's when I really started getting sucked in or gotten involved with Houston Audubon and enjoyed the working on the different sanctuaries and the things that Houston Audubon was trying to do. First of all, Flo Hanna, in her own way, she's just one of these people you wanted to be around. Flo was just a joy to be around. She's just easygoing, pleasant, smart, and I did a work day with her outside of Bolivar Flats where we planted 1,000 little sprigs of grass, very patiently in the mud and with her. And from the morning you got there till the lunch break, she's just a pleasant person to be around, and you could understand the vision of where she was trying to get with replenishing this area with the native plants. And you just say, hey, whatever that lady is doing, I want to be part of that. I want to be on her team because she's doing the right thing. And that's how I got involved. I wasn't a big birder. My wife was a birder. She grew up in the Corpus Christi area and was a birder, and we would go on hikes, and I'd get bored at first when she would stop to look at what are you stopping to look at? Well, there's this warbler, blah, blah, blah. And then slowly I became a birder in there. And when people asked, I was 40-something-year-old macho guy, right? You're a birder? Yeah. When you're out hiking, what are you doing? Just going from point A to point B? No, it's the journey. You got to stop, smell the roses, look at the birds, look at the butterflies. That's the joy of being out in nature. It's not just saying I hiked 10 miles today and I made it from point A to point B. Really look around and enjoy it. And when you start doing that, you really appreciate the fact how important the habitat is to everything we are as humans, and it's mostly, of course, birds. And that's the main message I got from Flo Hanna was without the habitat, all this is mute. So the reestablishing and preserving habitat was the main driver that got me involved in Houston Audubon. Houston Audubon was fortunate to bestow a nice gift from Miss McGovern to do a project on High Island. The challenge is, what project do you do? So I did chair a group of people that came together, and we through 4 or 5 meetings put together a framework which established needs, wants, desires of the High Island campus as a whole, and then we specifically talked about Smith Oaks. And it was an interesting process, difference of opinions. There was dissenting opinions from groups, and we had to work at it pretty hard and check. People had to check feelings and dust off and come back the next day and try again to establish where are we going with this? What are we trying to do? And out of that came the vision of the Canopy Boardwalk and the design of the Canopy Boardwalk and the upgrade in the restroom facilities in the Smith Oak area, and what do you do with the pump house? Since 1988 I think people have been trying to figure out, what do you do with the pump house? What do we do with the pump house? So we tried to incorporate all that into a project in Smith Oaks. And then you had to match the balance of what you want to do with the money you have to do it with, and the reality of the situation, that not everything you would like to do fits in that budget. And so we had to work through that process with aligning the designs of the canopy boardwalk with our budget, because the first pass it was going to exceed our budget that we had to work with. So we had to rethink and refocus our attentions on how to I don't want to say trim the boardwalk, but adjust the boardwalk design to match the budget. And Richard Gibbons was very helpful in that exercise. And in that process, we had to go through, recycle everything 2 or 3 times on what we're going to be able to do with the monies we had. And the Smith Oaks project was also an eye-opening event for Houston Audubon, because running an organization is one thing, but having a capital project and executing a capital project, the organization, it was a lot of growing pains for the organization. How do you execute the project? How do you track the project? How do you manage the project? How do you meet expectations, both spoken and unspoken? And so it was a big learning curve for staff and the volunteers working on that. But at the end, we were able to present to Ms. McGovern a project that matched the budget that we had, and it turned out really nice. I mean, you can't argue with the results. There were some pain and suffering getting there along the way with every capital project, and there's some things left undone that we would like to do, but we made a big strides on. Of course, the boardwalk itself is lovely. The restrooms are nice. The pump house is still improved but unfinished for some next idea of folks with the next ideas to pick it up and move forward with it. The pump house was the property of Smith Oaks, and the whole High Island was owned by the Amoco Oil Company. And the pump house was literally that. It was a building that had oil pumps with electric motors. I assume they were electric motors that would pump oil that was produced at High Island to the refineries and chemical plants in Port Arthur, Texas. There were pipelines laid along the ground, and they would cut across country straight to the refineries in the Port Arthur area. And so literally that's what they were, is the pumps. As the oil was collected, it was pumped. And that's why it's called the pump house. Being the COVID president, or the president at this time, because of technology, our board meetings started to evolve in different things. I remember the first board meeting we had, where we had a telecoms phone in the center of the table, and we thought we were just rock and roll, really slick, because at that time we did have some board members that were almost 70 miles away, 80 miles away. Distance-wise, and it gave them the ability to call in and participate in the board meeting, but not being here. And so that was early on in 2018, 17, when I was just a board member. But when COVID hit, we were faced with, we had to go virtual. Our bylaws were not set up for virtual meetings. We weren't set up with equipment for virtual meetings, and so we had to figure it out as we went, with staff help and other people's knowledge. And we went from meeting in person to meeting completely 100% online. And the dynamics of a meeting is very different in person than it is online. As I've like to say, when you're in a virtual meeting with the board, the louder voices become louder, the softer voices become softer. And when you're chairing that meeting, you're really challenged with trying to maintain some camaraderie, some spirit of a board. And it becomes challenging, and it was challenging, to get the softer voices to speak up, to call them out. Not by definition, most of the softer voices are introverts, and they don't want to participate. And having a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting allows them to just be observers, but you need them to participate. So you have to call them out. You have to ask for their input on, especially on a subject they know something about. And so it required the president, the chairman chairing the meeting, it required me to be very proactive in identifying people, calling them out, getting them to participate. Sometimes you leave the silence in the meeting, you leave it open so somebody will fill the void, so that people feel like they're participating, they're contributing. We still are virtually meeting, and it's still a struggle, especially for new members coming on the board who haven't had a chance to just have a cup of coffee with you in the lobby before the meeting, or talk after the meeting about what vacation are they going, have they seen any birds, or what it is. So it's still very much a challenge right now, and for future board members who, if you stay with the virtual meetings, to develop the relationships and maintain the relationships. The things you miss is during a meeting, somebody brings up a subject. You miss the lift of an eyebrow, a squirm in a seat. What are they saying? What do they know that they're not saying? And you've got to see them somehow on the screen. You've got to be aware of what's going on and get that information out, because everybody on the board contributes in some way. That's why they're on the board. I think it was John Bardos and Ben Hosley one time when they were talking to me about becoming president. I was like, oh, guys, I can't be president. I don't have a skill set like you guys have. You guys, attorney, and Ben being a very successful businessman that he is. And they said, no, everybody contributes to the board in a different way. I came with a different skill set. I was a former little city councilman in the city of Spring Valley, so I had that little nuance going for me, an engineer. And it just so happened during this Smith Oaks project, the boardwalk and everything we did on that project fed very nicely into my project management skills. Things I've done before in business fit very well. So the point being is everybody contributes. But as the president, your job is trying to find a way to allow them to contribute, because they are smart people. They're all smart people. They're all smarter than I am. And as a group, we're smarter than we are as individuals. And that's the frustration and the challenge of the virtual meeting, is to continue to be a successful organization in the virtual world. And the challenge, too, is in that atmosphere, trying to maintain institutional knowledge is very difficult. It's very difficult. There's things that I know that I need to make sure somebody else knows, so that 10 years from now when somebody says, why did we do this? You know why we did this. Why does the pump house look the way it is today? Well, because this is what we made decisions for 2-3 years ago. And passing down that institutional knowledge in a virtual world is difficult for me. And I haven't figured out how, as an organization, we can protect the institutional knowledge of the board in the virtual world. It's something that we're going to have to work on very proactively to maintain that. It's not going to happen on its own. It just isn't going to happen. We have to be very proactive in seeking ways to share knowledge, document the knowledge. You can write all this down on a piece of paper and put it on a book and put it on the shelf, but if nobody knows that the book is there, you've lost the knowledge. So in the short term, I think that's one of the challenges Houston Audubon has, is maintaining their institutional knowledge of the last 10, 20, 30 years, especially in today's political climate about diversity, inclusion. How do you do that? How do you reach out? And you can't force people to join you, right? You have to make them want to join you. We've been fortunate over the last couple of years that I didn't come up with the idea, and I can't remember who did, but our YPAC, our Young Professional Advisory Council, has been amazing. It's just they've been hitting it out of the park. The things that the YPAC bring to the organization and the energy they bring is a great opportunity for the organization. The YPAC over the years have had what's called Bird Week, which happens in September. And the programs they have been hugely successful. I mean, my wife and I went out to one of the YPAC events in Sugar Land. It was an organized bird tour. There was hundreds of people there because the YPAC put the energy out and said, we're going to do this. And people were hungry for it, so they all showed up to do it. trying to bridge the YPAC to the board itself and the organization is key to success. We've had some success. We had an opportunity to bring one of the YPACers on the board. He's done great for us. He's Tony Dang. I'll mention him by name. He's been a great bridge to the YPAC, to understanding and helping us. How do we do what we're talking about, bringing more younger people in, different diversity of people? He's helped that greatly, but he's also educated us in that a board meeting is a board meeting. It can be, the reason I call it a board meeting, because sometimes it's boring. You're going over financials, you're dealing with HR issues, you're dealing with the business side of a nonprofit. And that's not for every young person. That's not for everybody who is a good birder. Because you're a good birder doesn't mean you want to be on the board, because it'll make you, sometimes you want to stick a pencil in your eye. It's just you have the business of the nonprofit to deal with, and business is the business of it. And so bringing people into our programs is important, and the diversity of bringing them into our programs, but bringing them into our board is also important, but it's a different type of person. It's a different type of expectation. And we're still working on that, on how do we bring the right person onto a board that wants to contribute in that environment and that would truly blossom in that arena, and we don't bring them on there and kill them, put Roundup on them. Because we've gone through this. I've been involved in the nominating committee to bringing new board members on, and you always go, wisdom, wealth, what is it that you want from a new board member, a certain level of expertise. And when you start looking at younger people with different backgrounds in the oil and gas, most of us come from the oil and gas, as we're in Houston, it's just the fact. You have to say, is it a good match for them as an individual too? You can't lose sight of that, because it is about people, and the worst thing you can do is ask somebody to be on the board and they accept, and it's just not a good fit for them, and they're miserable for 6 years. We just don't want that as well. So one of the questions that you might get asked when somebody says, hey, you want to be president of Houston Audubon, what does being president of the board mean? And it's a question that to each president it's a little different. But when I became president of Houston Audubon, one of the charges I took upon myself is, when you're president, you're not president of the organization, you're president of the board. The executive director is the executive director of the organization. And so I took it as a challenge that as board president, my job is to make the executive director as successful as possible. It's a subservient leadership role that you're taking on. Your job is to help the board be a successful project and make the staff and the executive director as successful as project. So it's not about me. It's about us bringing, as a body, our expertise and our knowledge from different business backgrounds to making the people that actually work here for a living, giving them the opportunity to be as successful as they can be. I think that's important that people realize that when they join the board or they're asked to be president, that's the charge. In my mind, at least that's what the charge was. During Bird Week and the interaction I've had with the YPAC, and first of all, it's surprising, not surprising, it's just they're very, very bright people with very bright ideas. And they've been able to do things without hardly any effort. Well, we're going to have a beer named after a bird. Well, they go out and do it. And I would have thought, well, I'd have to have 4 or 5 committee meetings before just to figure out who we would ask. And they've already got it done. So the efficiency of this group and the maybe the inexperience of, well, you just go do it. You don't ask for permission. The can-do attitude of the YPAC, I think, has been one of the most amazing things that have come out of it. They just have an idea and they go do it. No talk about it. No, blue ribbon committee. No, just go do it. And I think they've opened my eyes to sometimes we get bogged down in the process of trying to accomplish something instead of getting it done. And that energy level and that insight into as we all get older, forgot that sometimes you can just go do things. It's okay. It'll be okay. And if they try something, it doesn't work, it's all right. It's no harm, no foul. They just get it done. And in a week's time, they'll engage thousands of people that otherwise Houston Audubon wouldn't engage with. And their like I said, their can-do attitude has just been very eye-opening to me.
That's wonderful.
When you meet people in general, if you go to a bird festival outside of the Houston area, like down the Rio Grande Bird Festival, and somebody says, "Oh, you ask you, what do you do?" And I say, "Well, I'm involved with Houston Audubon." And they say, "Oh, well, that's nice." And you can tell immediately that a lot of people don't understand what Houston Audubon is or does. And when you share with people, well, Houston Audubon has 2,600 acres. Does that sound right? A great deal of acreage under conservation easements or control or ownership, direct ownership of, it changes the conversation. And so Houston Audubon really is, I would say, a leader in the nation, as far as I can tell from Audubon organizations, in habitat preservation. Everybody does good work, everybody contributes in their way. But the fact that we're in such a rich bird environment, and we work with all our partners between the Texas Parks and Wildlife, the U.S. Fish and Wild Game, to preserve as much habitat as we possibly can is so important, especially with Houston becoming the third largest city in the United States very shortly. It'll be the third largest city. The habitat we have and we have to try to protect is definitely the main charge with Houston Audubon, and the things that we've been able to do over the years, and the additional acreage when we were able to finally close the BP land deal and put another 600 acres of high island under permanent habitat preservation is a huge win. It's a huge win for everybody. And all the birders who come from around the world to High Island during the spring, some of them, I think they miss the point about how hard Houston Audubon works to protect that habitat that everybody wants to come see. And it takes a lot of energy, a lot of positive energy to do that. Why would anybody want to get involved with Houston Audubon? It's a fair question. It goes to the core of what are you doing with your life outside your professional life, for example? What's important to you? What do you care about? What do you find value in? You can join organizations right and left, but you have to kind of first like the organization and what their focus is, and you have to like the people and what they're trying to do. The draw of Houston Audubon is you get people from different walks of life, different professional backgrounds, but when you're out there standing shoulder to shoulder after a hurricane, repairing damage, hurricane damage, or trying to reestablish habitat in an area, there's a common bond that all job titles are left on the side of the road, all places in life are left on the side of the road. It's just a group of people that have come together for the common good of nature, birds, and people. And that's, if you're attracted to that thing, then you should be attracted to Houston Audubon. And one of the things that really attracted me to Houston Audubon as well, and I've seen it many times, is Houston Audubon always tries very hard to stay true to their mission statement. It's very easy for organizations to get drug off into directions that isn't their core mission. But Houston Audubon is always, in my experience, has always come back to their core mission. Is this the right thing for the birds? Is this the right thing for habitat? Is it the right thing for the people that interface with the birds and the habitat? And 99% of the answer of the time is yes, yes, yes. And that's why I've been so glad to be part of Houston Audubon.